The oldest war in the history of our world, and by proxy potentially even the universe, is between two very sophisticated life forms. One of them is bacteria, which is the most abundant life form on Earth. And the second, which is arguably life or not life, depends on your definition, is viruses. So these strings of genetic code that are able to infect living beings and change the fundamental language of life in some way that they make the host into their life form. And so these two have been going at it back and forth for more than 400 million years in an increasingly sophisticated, escalated battle for dominance. So the viruses generally win. And by generally, I mean 99.9 times out of 100, the virus successfully infects the host, takes it over, and does whatever its core function is to the detriment of the bacteria. But that 0.01 time, the bacteria survives. And the surviving bacteria have developed this incredibly sophisticated defense against the viruses, where they then, once they have been infected, they have created a process for scanning every new DNA sequence that comes into them. So as they're going about their life, consuming things, energy, all the points of bacterial life, they now scan each strand of DNA that comes into them. And when they find something that matches the pattern of the one that infected them before, that they have successfully defended against, they have this nice little process where they cut it and they can paste a different string of DNA, one that will no longer be effective and cause them to have the damage. So this ability to cut and paste, and just like on your computer, if everybody remembers, you can grab almost anything, an image or letters or whatever, cut it and paste it between applications. This function of the bacteria to cut a strand of DNA and then replace it with a different strand of DNA is something called CRISPR. And CRISPR is a very long acronym that will only drive you crazy, but for the purposes of thinking about it, think about it as a cut and paste function. And we discovered this protein that was able to make this happen called Cas9. So you'll sometimes hear this referred to as CRISPR-Cas9, but the function, the core one, the CRISPR, the cut and paste capability, exists across a whole bunch of different bacterias. And we were able to go in and hijack this function. So why is this important? DNA is really the core language of which all life is built. Every function in your body is the blueprint of DNA that you inherited from your parents and now is deciding what you as an organism do. So inside every cell, there is a little string of data, super small, super dense, incredibly powerful, made up of just 4 simple instructions. And I won't go into the whole details. If you'd like, I'm happy to do that in another video. But what's important about CRISPR is it allows us to cut and paste DNA inside of a living organism. This means if I want to change the color of your eyes, the shade of your skin, your ability to defend against a particular illness or a virus, I can do it to you while you are alive. I can make those changes inside of your living cells, and your body or your cells will then produce whatever that change is that I have created, which is pretty incredible. So some of the things that we've discovered in the last decade or so since we figured out how CRISPR works is that there's a whole bunch of genetic diseases out there that are just a problem of like a single protein or single expression of a DNA that cause a massive problem for the person. Maybe it's immunoresistance. We were able to suss out how to cure AIDS, which has been a plague on mankind. We're starting to look at individual cases. So it takes some time. The engineering of it is not simple. Because of the power of CRISPR, one of the dangers is that when you start making changes, it can also edit adjacent cells or adjacent pieces of DNA. So you need to be super careful with it so that you're not making too many changes. But the important part for this video to really think about is, it is the ability for the first time in human history for us to accurately be able to scan for and replace the language of living cells, which is effectively the language of life in your body. And so it is part of an incredible toolkit. And there's a second part of the toolkit that I'm going to refer to a little bit later that sort of completes the process. But this is the first part of the toolkit that will allow us to be able, with absolute accuracy, to be able to rewrite the code of life at a living, functioning organism level, or even to make changes that will be reflected in every one of your offspring for the rest of your existence. So we as a human species now have the tool set to be able to make decisions about how we want ourselves to be. So it's kind of God power for humans. Now, the problem with this is it doesn't give us wisdom. It doesn't tell us what the right decisions are to change or to make, but it does allow us the capability to quickly be able to make changes. And so we have a reference guide. There isn't an instruction book that says, here's how you build a better human, but there is all of the other life forms that exist on the planet and the hundreds of millions of years that nature and natural selection has been going to create some unbelievably effective characteristics. So let's imagine that you wanted to have the kind of sight like an eagle that can, at 4 or 5 kilometers, pick out a mouse running through the sagebrush and be able to zoom in on it. Or the strength of a monkey who has, sort of approximate physicality to you, but can outlift you by 3 or 4 times. Or better endurance, or the ability to sleep less. So it is the capability to graft superpowers onto humans that are based upon other things in the animal kingdom. And even beyond that, we can start to look at what are the genetic expressions for intelligence, for aggression. So if this sounds too much like eugenics, don't panic. I'm not trying to build a super race, but I am looking at it from the standpoint that there might be characteristics that are built into this organism called humans that has been around the planet as Homo sapiens for, depending on who you believe, maybe 100 or 200,000 years, that were super effective when we were in little 200-person clusters running across the Savanah, that might not be the best characteristics when you look at us as 8 or 9 billion people trying to live together on a planet that maybe wasn't made to support so many bipedal humans running around. So what it gives us is a engineering toolkit to be able to express what have been historically some philosophical understandings of what it means to be human. And I think this is very critically important because I am personally a believer that we are going to be the last generation of strictly Homo sapiens that will exist. So from here forward, we are going to have the ability, and there are already going to be expressions of changes in the creature that is known as human, that we will no longer be the same exact species going forward. And we already have difficulties getting along with each other, so I hope that we use this wisely and we really think it through. But it's really cool to understand that for the first time ever, we have that ability to be able to change ourselves at a fundamental level that will move forward for the rest of time. And so it's an incredible power. It is an unbelievable responsibility, and it is up to you and the 800 or 900 billion people like you to decide what we do with this, how this is handled, and what the benefits that it can bring or the detriments to mankind, humankind, womankind, our kind going forward. So I think it is the discovery biologically of the century, except it's a pretty incredible century. So hold your breath. There's a couple of other things that might be on comparison, but I would put it somewhere up about the importance of the discovery of fire or mathematics in terms of what its effect will ultimately be on the human race moving forward. So I hope you get the basics of that. It was a fight between bacteria and viruses. They created this incredible tool. We were able to hijack that tool. Turns out you don't have to be particularly sophisticated. It's cheap. You can do these things for a few bucks. And there are already whole companies that are dedicated to the research and the development of this taking place across the world. And we're already seeing unbelievable results that are coming out of this. So please be aware of it, give some thought to it, maybe even think about what you think are the right decisions for it and how this is going to affect you personally and the world that you live in. So I hope you found that interesting. Thanks so much.